Hello and welcome to Modelmania. Now we usually say Modelmania is a condition that compels people to recreate the world in miniature, making something like this a swordfish, which is a 1/72nd scale. But take a look at this. This is also a swordfish, the quarter of the size of the real thing. You've guessed it, today we are going large. We're looking at mega models. And here to help me out today is top model expert Roy Lever. Roy, nice to see you again.
Nice to see you again, Kevin.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much indeed.
So what is the fascination with large models?
Well, it's just so awesome, isn't it? That's the word. Once you build a large model, you really can't go back to building small models like that.
And people won't be put off by the grand size of it?
No, I don't think so. There were people in the past, I used to get a lot of criticism, but that's because they hadn't got one.
Because you've made some famous planes. Tell us about that.
Well, the Concorde was the first model Concorde ever to take off the ground. Even the full-size guys invited us down to show them how to do it with their model because they had to drop it from a helicopter. And then, of course, the famous Lancaster that had 7 years flying, now is resident in a museum in Germany.
Yeah. Well, nice. I'm in the presence of a star here. Nice to see you, Roy.
There's no such thing.
We've got lots more coming from Roy later on. But living with a large model isn't easy, as we'll be finding out from Dr. Keith Mitchell, whose garage has become a hangar for his hand-built Beaufighter, and he's still got to take the wings off to get it in there. And if that's not big enough for you, take a look at this. A giant B-17 Flying Fortress bomber, just one of the enormous aircraft I saw at a special meeting of mega modelers. But all that is coming later. Now, if you're considering making a model aircraft like this one, there are a few things that you've got to consider first, right, Roy?
Absolutely.
Okay, first thing?
First thing, don't try and do this on your own. Teamwork, join the Large Model Association, find out what's required before you can get a permit to fly. They'll help you all they can.
Rules and regulations, are they quite stringent?
100% stringent, for the simple reason one of these things could damage people. Safety is of paramount, and construction methods, and the kind of radio you put in it, etc.
Okay, thanks for the minute, Ryan. The way Roy says it, you've got to take note of that, absolutely. Now, later on we're going to be showing you some special techniques how you could construct larger aircrafts like this one. Also, we've got an ingenious parachute mechanism that could stop your pride and joy from becoming a bin liner job. I think that's what it's called.
A bin liner job,
yeah?
It is.
But right now we're going to join maestro modeler Dr. Keith Mitchell, who has prepared several model aircrafts, not from a kit, but from scratch.
I don't know of any other hobby which has so many elements to attract you to it. It has the constructing of it, it has the design of it, the engineering skills, you need some electrical skills, you then have to be able to fly, and that takes a lot, as I've described. And then, at the end of the day, having done all this, you have to be the test pilot. The zing about the hobby is the fact that we risk all that, all those years, all those thousands of pounds, all that endeavour, on a few seconds of this thing happening on its first flight. The Beaufighter has a very nasty reputation as a Second World War aircraft. It was a lovely flying aeroplane, not very fast, but it was known for the fact that it was very, very heavily armed and could carry all sorts of different things like depth charges, and the model I have here carries a torpedo, which is demonstrated in the flight of it. But it's a beautiful aeroplane in the sky, and it's one of the nicest scale aircraft that I've ever flown.
Keith's first foray into giant aircraft modelling produced this. A Dambusters Lancaster bomber. It had a wingspan of 16 feet, took over 10 years to build, and crashed tragically after only 2 years of flying.
Within a week of crashing the Lancaster, I cut the side panels of the Beaufighter. It's a bit like falling off a horse. If you ride horses, you know what the instructor says to you or the person who's teaching you. Get straight back in the saddle and ride again. My aim always is not only to produce a good model, but is to produce something which, when somebody who knows something about aircraft looks at it, is given a sense that this is a miniature real aeroplane, not a model of something. And there are some skills required in giving realism to a model aircraft. You then start with various sneaks, which I have to admit are techniques of deception. You try and make the airplane look like aluminium, and it isn't made of aluminium. Aluminium's too heavy. So with the use of paint and scraping off the top coat to reveal an aluminium paint underneath, you can make the aeroplane look like the full size. You can put rivets on it. The bullfighter has 38,000, which were each put on individually with a syringe, silver paint and talcum powder mixed together. And you rub the whole thing down to make it look abraded and worn.
These giant models are their most realistic in flight, and although Keith's a veteran large model flyer, he still gets nervous as he prepares to take to the sky.
Every time we fly, we know that we're battling against aerodynamics, against problems with the weather, against problems of our own lack of skill, against problems that we've built into the aeroplane because it isn't perfect, all those things. And it's marvellous. And that's why we do it in distinction, for instance, to model railways or model boats, which don't have the same sort of risk.
It's impossible to fly such large models without support from a ground crew, especially in very windy conditions like these, at a large model flying event in the Northumberland Hills. It's going to take all Keith's flying skills to keep the Bullfighter airborne, let alone make it move through the sky like the full-size aircraft.
Very large model aircraft are an intrusion into any domestic household. I would say it's like having 6 children in one sense. They're all over the place. The smells get everywhere. Things stand in bedrooms. Oil gets on the carpet. And one has to try and balance these things, and certainly if you're married, you have to have a very forgiving wife, and my wife is very supportive. But I've got to be careful too, because the whole thing can become obsessive.
Safely down there despite the winds. Now, if you're going to be tackling something as dramatic and as big as Keith Mitchell's Bullfighter, then the materials have to be right. They've got to be strong but not heavy. And Roy's got some top tips in that area.
I think they are top tips. I don't see people using them very often, but they are top tips. This is a piece of fibre.
Wouldn't hold anything together, that.
Well, it would hold some things, but it can be used in a very clever way. First of all, it doesn't weigh anything, does it?
Light as a feather.
So when we add it to a piece of balsa wood like this, it's really no weight disadvantage. In fact, you can see I'm just finishing this bit off with what's known as cyanoacrylate, super glue to you, but it's a very good super glue. It happens to be an industrial one. And all we do is flatten it down like that onto the wood.
You see that, right?
And you can see it's drying off.
Okay.
To help it, you just put a little bit of spit and move your finger very quickly.
Why?
Otherwise you'll stick your finger to it.
Why the saliva, Roy?
The saliva is normally an alkaline, and therefore the alkaline sets this off and makes it harder. So now we have quite a rigid piece of material there, as we can see from this piece of balsa.
So how strong is that wood now from what it used to be?
Roughly 5 times stronger for its splitting.
Just with the carbon?
Just with the carbon and the cyano. Here's an ordinary piece of wood.
Okay, fine.
And you can feel how that is.
No problem.
Here is a piece of the same wood, but with carbon fibre each side. And of course,
that is quite strong.
It is extremely strong, yes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And when you think it's not really added to the weight, then it's a big plus in building large models.
Okay, so that's the balsa wood with the carbon.
It is indeed, with the carbon.
Now, what's this funny bit?
Well, this is very funny, isn't it? It looks very much like a sieve of some kind, but it's made from Kevlar, and it's called honeycomb.
It's called honeycomb, made from Kevlar.
All we do here is to place a piece of balsa wood underneath,
Sure.
nothing up my sleeves, and another piece on top with some epoxy in between. And that makes a sandwich which is so strong they use it on the 747 floors.
So what actually makes it so strong?
Because of the honeycomb allows the bonding to this particular grain. You can see the grain on the wood, therefore it's weak in that direction.
I see.
The honeycomb bonds it together, very much like the carbon fibre, and it means very strong sandwich. So you could make a spar out of that, or any area where there was multi-stresses on it.
And whereabout could you get hold of this? Any model shop? Or?
Well, model shops do sell this, and people specialise in it. Materials link and making fiberglass, they use it a lot. It's used in Formula One.
Okay, well, without these two materials, can you just take any materials and make them stronger?
Yes, you can. You take an ordinary piece of balsa wood here, and just by putting cyanoacrylate along its length like that, letting it dry, it increases the strength of the material.
At least
it's still a bit sticky.
At least double the strength there, that
yes,
will, won't it?
At least double the strength. And you can do that with any material. Any fibrous material, cyanoacrylate will bond it together better than its natural bond.
Lovely. Thanks for the minute, Roy. Now, obviously, the bigger the aircraft, the more dramatic it is when it falls out of the sky. Now, Roy has an ingenious device that will hopefully prevent total destruction. Right, Roy?
That's right.
And also, we will be going into the skies with some mega modelers. We'll see you soon. Welcome back to Modelmania, the show for everyone with a passion for model making. And today, we're looking at enormous models. And Roy Lever is getting stuck into glue. Why, Roy?
Well, it's better than nailing things together to fly.
Okay, too heavy, the old nails.
Too heavy and too noisy. And what we want to look at first is a well-known epoxy. And that means we have a catalyst in one bottle and an epoxy ester in the other. And it's absolutely essential that these are mixed correctly. First thing we do is to make sure there is an even volume of each material.
Okay.
We're only using a small piece here because it's a demonstration, and the first thing to do is to move one into the other, stir in one direction and then reverse it. And you'll see very quickly it becomes a milky colour.
And that's the colour you're looking for?
That means we can now use that.
Okay.
And when having used it, we get 5 minutes. If we don't mix it correctly, of course, it never sets.
Okay, so how much would the bottles cost?
About £9 to £10.
Okay, and could you finish a model? Because obviously we're doing big models
certainly.
today.
If it was a big model, you'd probably need 2 or 3 bottles like that. But
okay.
So what? There is no replacement for epoxy glue.
Okay.
Well, you do a bit of mixing with that, Kevin, while I just demonstrate this rather amazing thing we found with ordinary PVA. This is the ordinary white glue that modelers use 9 times out of 10 on an ordinary model. And to double its strength, all you do is rub it into both surfaces, make sure it's nice, put them together like that, and then put a little bit of cyanoacrylate on one end, and it'll run right the way through like that and stick on your finger like it's doing there.
And how did you come across that mixture?
This was just an accident.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that we'd actually done it with the white glue already, and I put some cyanoacrylate on it, and lo and behold, it's so strong.
Got a nice little mixture there.
A lovely mixture.
Well, I shudder to think how much glue it would take to hold together a giant B-17 Flying Fortress bomber. Probably a lot, do you think?
An awful lot.
Well, I tell you what, somebody had to do it. Take a look at this. Now, Dave, the word model springs to mind, but it's a slightly bit bigger than the model, isn't it?
It's a very large model, yeah. It's 18'6" wingspan. It's a 1/6 scale B-17 Flying Fortress.
I mean, I was amazed to see it in the air. What kind of reactions do you get from other people?
Oh, I mean, wherever you go with something like this, I mean, everybody stands and watch. They all stop flying and come and watch something like this, because you don't see one of these every day.
Absolutely
Models
not.
of this size.
And when you get on the controls, the pressure's on, everybody's watching, you've
yes.
got to fly it.
Yeah. you always feel, even if the conditions aren't quite right, you always feel tempted, even though you shouldn't do that, to fly it, but it's quite pleasant to out there, a bit breezy. But,
Well, speaking of the conditions, how difficult or how easy is it to fly such a plane like this?
It's far easier to fly something like this than a smaller Twitchy. It doesn't get knocked about in the air with the wind the same as a small one.
It's quite famous, this aeroplane as well, isn't it?
This one is 909, yeah, the one we've actually copied. It was based at Bassingbourne in Cambridgeshire, but it did the most recorded bombing missions in the war. The replica of this one is still actually flying in the United States, around the air shows, yeah. So it's most well known. It's known as 909. It is the most well known B-17.
Aircraft which are heavier than 7 kilogram have to conform with certain requirements, minimal requirements. However, above 20 kilograms, then the aeroplanes aren't toys anymore, and they could really damage either property or life and limb. And so it is commensurate on those individuals who partake in building these very, very big aircraft to have them designed and constructed to a basic standard. And the Large Model Association runs a design and inspection scheme with the agreement of the Civil Aviation Authority on behalf of them to inspect these aeroplanes.
So Mick, when did your interest in planes first start?
Well, probably as a child, soon after the war. I think an uncle bought me a small balsa kit and built it for me, and that sort of started my interest. And I've more or less carried on most of my life since then.
And you progressed to a beautiful plane like this?
That's right, yeah.
Well, tell us the history and a bit about this plane.
Well, it's a Sopwith 1.5 Strata from World War I, British. It's quite a big model. I normally compete in world championships, and this is too big for the normal class. They have weight limits, which is slightly smaller than this.
How would you go about putting one of these together?
If you're designing one, the hardest part is the research. If you want it to be accurate, and you need to be accurate for competition, you've got to get drawings and information, photographs on the actual one you're building, not just the type, the actual one.
Right.
And if you haven't got that before you start, you end up with a model that is not quite completely accurate.
It's incredible. So how long would it have taken you to make this biplane?
Probably something like 6 months to a year.
Is that every day or?
All your spare time, really, all your weekends, all your evenings. And as I work for myself, daytime as well, but depending on what time you've got to spare.
So 3 times world champion, what's in the future for you?
Well, I think I'm getting past winning now. I'm still fairly good. In fact, this was second in the Euro Champs last year.
Wow.
And that was without any flying practice because I've been flying jets for a couple of years and I hadn't flown this one.
Right.
And that put me back a little bit.
So if you'd have been flying with this one, you probably would have come first?
Possibly, yeah. Although the chap who won was very good.
It's a Supermarine Sea Otter which superseded the Walrus. The Walrus was underpowered, and on most occasions when it picked up crews from the sea, it had to taxi back to the shore. But with the Sea Otter, it proved to be a more powerful engine, slightly larger in size, and it could really take off in most choppy seas. I was drawn to it because of its unusualness and for the fact that there isn't one, a real one, in existence in England, and that when I went to Yeovilton Air Museum, they were absolutely amazed that I wanted to build one. I anticipated it to be almost unflyable, but when I took off, it flew itself off and I didn't bother to touch the controls. It just headed off into the blue. So of course since then I've been refining my skills in order to make certain it looks a little bit more realistic.
Perfect landings there. But what happens if your giant model gets into difficulty, Roy?
Well, here's my answer to it, and I've been using this for 20 years.
Okay.
This parachute has got a memory built into the material. It's a special material. I'm not going to tell you what it is. And you can see the answer. It automatically comes out.
I'm not going to let you get off the hook that easy. It's a special material. What kind of material is it, Roy?
Well, it's just one of those things I like to keep to myself. It's something I thought of at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right, okay, fair enough. And why has it got a hole at the top?
Well,
there?
that's to stabilise the parachute.
When it opens.
When it comes out, the air can come out of the parachute, so it stops it spilling around and makes it more stable.
Okay.
And it's very easy to pack. All you have to do is tell the parachute how you want it to loop when it comes out.
And you're folding it from the bottom there and not from the top. Is that important?
That is very important because now, when that's packed in there, you can see it springs out on its own.
Gotcha.
Isn't that nice?
Nice material. What is it again?
I can't tell you.
Oh, right, okay.
Maybe at some other programme.
Okay.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to pack this in this 200 mile an hour jet.
Right.
And it's a very
200
nice,
miles an hour?
200 miles an hour. And it's a very nice aeroplane to fly. So the reason he's still here is he's done 3 parachute jumps on occasions where people interfered with me while I was flying. And that's very sad, but it does happen to the best of us.
So what made you come up with the idea of the parachute?
Well, it was the
itself?
only damn thing I could think of when I'm doing films and shows where there are people at risk.
Right.
And we can't afford to do that anymore. So here we are, we'll just lock him into there, hope it works first time. It's reasonably worked. There we go.
So that locks into there.
That locks into there, and now you can see that the parachute is inside the cockpit and trapped by this little servo that we've just operated.
Okay, so how do you know when... how can you tell it to open if you can't see the plane or if something's happening?
It does that automatically. The receiver has its own computer, and it knows when your battery's flat, for instance.
Right.
And
So battery's flat, it'll just open straight away?
It will indeed, instantly.
Right.
And it shuts the engine down as well, because obviously you can't be doing 200 miles an hour when the parachute comes out.
Yeah.
So we shut the engine down first and then blow the parachute.
Right.
And the other occasion is when, as we've got now, for instance, somebody's flying along and saws up your tailplane, then you can manually blow it off. This is a manual blow-off.
Yeah.
There it goes, and out comes the parachute.
So obviously when you're up in the air, you're doing 200 miles an hour, that parachute goes straight to the back.
Straight to the back, and it self-levels because it's on strings that automatically set the parachute as the airplane slows down to become over the centre of gravity.
And that's just by this piece of nylon wire there?
Yes, this is £500 fishing line, which is very good.
£500 fishing line, that takes
yeah.
to the centre of the model and holds her up.
It does indeed.
That is incredible.
Well, it's now the role and the law, indeed, in America.
So this is not just used for models?
No, it's used for full size.
I see.
Every model I've flown in shows and for public and for films for the last 20 years has always had a parachute system, and it's always saved my aircraft.
And how has it been received with other modelists?
Well, they think it's a gimmick.
Really?
But they don't have perhaps the kind of experience I've had. Such near-dos before we had the parachute system. And now I feel like I've got a lifeboat.
Yeah.
If anything
But they
goes
think it's a
wrong.
gimmick, and you're talking about safety, aren't you?
It is strange, isn't it? Yeah. But that seems to be the general feeling. Of course, now it's been accepted more or less all over the world as an idea. Then the Americans are making it a condition of having a light aeroplane.
Right.
Well, people are looking at this seriously again. Now, I didn't invent the parachute, that was a Frenchman, but I invented the idea of putting it in a model.
Well, let's be
airplane.
thankful that they're looking at it more serious now.
I think they are. I think there's no doubt about that.
Roy, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Nice
Thank you
seeing
again,
you,
Mr.
Kevin.
Roy Lever. Thank you
Really
very
nice
much.
working with you.
And thank you for watching Modelmania. Who knows, next time it could be locomotives, planes, trains, or even rockets. One thing's for sure, join us next time on Modelmania.